Does Monday at the office feel like a storm? Not with Microsoft Copilot. That feeling when Copilot gets everyone up to speed instantly? It's sunny again. When Copilot simplifies complex data so your teams can act, that sun's shining on a beach. And when Copilot uncovers hidden insights, you're on that beach with your people, and you find buried treasure. That's Microsoft Copilot. Learn more at Microsoft.com/AI for all.
SeaQuest bills itself as a family-friendly exotic animal experience at the Boulevard Mall, but they're facing serious allegations of neglect and abuse. Birds trapped dying in walls for days, iguanas so starved they eat gravel and die, sharks trying to bite guests they're so hungry. Today on CityCast Las Vegas, it's going to get a little graphic as we talk with Channel 13's chief investigator, Darcy Spears. Her years-long reporting has put SeaQuest on the defensive. And with a recent protest drawing new attention, we ask, is this the kind of place that belongs in our community? It's Wednesday, March 13th. I'm Dayvid Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Darcy, how does SeaQuest envision itself? What's the rosy version of what they do?
Their rosy version, the marketing version, what you're going to see on their website, which is splashy and colorful and seems to portray families having a wonderful time, is that you have a unique opportunity to experience an interaction with exotic creatures in a controlled environment. That's basically what they're selling. You can swim with sharks and stingrays. You can hand feed birds, otters, wallabies, coatimundis, iguanas. That type of hands-on interaction seems like it would be a very exciting thing for children and something that clearly attracts parents to want to do as a family activity. But the people who work there and see what goes on behind the scenes say that it's just a very different thing. The animals are the ones paying the price, despite the high price the guests pay for each of those interactions. And employees say it's just not a happy place for those animals to be.
Well, you know, it's described as sort of this mashup between a petting zoo and an aquarium, and what could possibly go wrong? So what is the gap? Yeah, well, there you go. And you've done a lot of reporting here. What is the gap, Darcy, between the picture that they paint on their website and the reality?
There are a number of gaps. And again, all of this is coming not only from a number of former employees that we have interviewed both on and off camera, but veterinary experts who have looked at this in different states across the country, and people from the Humane Society of the United States. We look at animal control citations, USDA citations. So the variety of input here is quite large. What they say is going to happen versus what does happen differs in a variety of ways. People get bit, people get scratched, people get stung, people get scared, and that's just people.
I just want to know what kind of stories are coming out of the Las Vegas branch here, out of the Boulevard Mall.
We've reported on otters that have died. One that unfortunately got caught in a filtration system, got its arm caught in a filtration system and either drowned or, as we were told, may have gotten shredded in the fan. SeaQuest did not explain in depth exactly what happened, although they admit that the animal died, which left us wondering, who did they consult with when they built a filtration system in an otter enclosure that was not otter-proof? We've been told stories about octopi, or octopuses, I'm told is the proper way to say that. Octopuses, one in particular where something happened with the temperature in the octopus's tank and it actually cooked alive and was burned to death in its own tank, according to the employee who told us that story.
Yeah, no, this is really hard to hear, but I do want to go through it. So a recent one was
the most recent one that we reported on in the story that we just had on a couple weeks ago was about a bird who became trapped in a wall. The employee who heard the bird asked the manager to open up the wall so that the bird could be freed. She said that manager said, no, just leave it in there. So she said she was forced to leave it in there to die, and she had to listen to that bird tweeting and frantically trying to find its way out or to some food or water for 4 days before it fell silent. And that kind of coldness and lack of compassion for these creatures that unfortunately authorities consider property is part of that disconnect.
Now, Darcy, we also heard that SeaQuest purposefully underfed some animals. Why would they do that?
According to the employees with direct knowledge of what has gone on there, they were told essentially to starve the animals, or at the very least to underfeed them in order to encourage those animals to interact with the guests, to go to the guests for food. In our most recent report, the iguanas in particular were highlighted because the employee who we interviewed, who was on the birds, reptiles, and mammals team, said that she was explicitly told that the guests would be doing pretty much all of the feeding for the iguanas. The guests are paying to feed the animals. They pay for each individual interaction, whether it's with a wallaby or an otter or a coatimundi or an iguana or a bird. They're paying for each of those experiences where they can go in and interact and hand feed those animals. And if the animals aren't eating from the guests' hands, then the guests aren't getting what they paid for. And so the employees tell us the only way to ensure that interaction, because the animals aren't naturally inclined to interact with people or to take food from people's hands, the only way to ensure that is to underfeed them so that essentially they would have no choice but to take the food from the guests' hands.
What does that lead to?
Well, in one case, there was a lawsuit that we discovered that was filed in September of 2023 by a local mother whose 3-year-old son was bitten by a shark during a feeding encounter. And you imagine a 3-year-old's arm is going to be pretty small. According to the lawsuit and the medical records, the shark latched onto this child's elbow and they couldn't get it off. And the child had to be taken by an ambulance to the emergency room at Sunrise Hospital and was fairly badly injured to the tune of SeaQuest paying the family $8,000 to, cover the kid's medical bills. So, and that's just one. The otters, they have sharp claws and they have sharp teeth and they bite. And the coatimundis, when they grab with those claws, they can scratch people's hands. They don't know how to be gentle. They're wild animals and they're hungry for food.
Yeah. I mean, is the converse true then, too, that is there a danger that the guests pose to some of these animals?
According to the employees, for example, when you're dealing with small children that have access to animals, children aren't necessarily trying to hurt them, but of course they don't always know how to be gentle. So we reported in some of our earlier stories back in 2019 of children crushing birds, stomping on them. Same thing for turtles, getting crushed by children who are allowed to handle them, small turtles. So when you have staff members who aren't really that well trained and don't have expertise in animal handling and or veterinary care, and sometimes they're just teenagers kind of chaperoning these families and these animals, they're not perhaps as aware as they should be about how the interaction needs to go down for everybody to be safe, people and creatures.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
Now, SeaQuest is a national company. They're headquartered in Boise, Idaho. I understand they have 7 locations across the country. So it sounds like from your reporting that there have been similar complaints made in other places. Did you find that Las Vegas, however, is a standout in any way? Are there similar stories here or even more egregious about the condition of the animals or anything like that here in Vegas?
Based on what I've seen, and I have a number of colleagues that I've spoken to who have been doing this reporting in their towns, as well as the recent collaboration project we did with the ABC network on this. Unfortunately, the stories across the country at each of the locations seem to be similar. And they transfer animals around. That's another thing, is they move animals around from one SeaQuest to another SeaQuest in different cities. Like, say, a sloth got burned at the Colorado facility. And then suddenly that sloth shows up here in Las Vegas. They move their inventory around, and it seems pretty consistent. The complaints seem pretty consistent from location to location. Now, the Las Vegas one hasn't shut down, whereas others have. You mentioned there were 7 locations in the U.S., and that is true, but there used to be 9. The one in Colorado and the one in Connecticut both recently shut down after a number of USDA complaints, citations, violations. We have complaints, citations, and violations here too.
Yeah, and we have to mention now clearly that SeaQuest has passed its most recent USDA investigation that I believe happened in September.
Yes. Well, actually, that was the Animal Protection Services, the most recent inspection done by Clark County Animal Protection Services.
Okay, and we're not aware of any animal protective services here in the Valley that have issued any kind of notice or shutdown or anything like that we're aware of. So
they find things and they fix them. They say, hey, this is not right. You know, your water is murky and it's green and it's algae filled. You need to fix that. Or you have dead bodies in your animal freezer dating back to April of 2023. Like, why is that? Or, hey, your iguana ate gravel and died. Don't put gravel in the iguana enclosures anymore. That's how it goes with Clark County Animal Protection Services. And while we're on that topic, one thing that really stood out to us when we were looking at the recent violations was the lag time between receiving a complaint and following up on that complaint. It's often weeks or even months before Animal Protection Services will follow up on a complaint. Sometimes they save it until the regularly scheduled inspection, which only happens twice a year. So think about that, David. If someone sees something and reports it, and the animal folks with the county don't follow up for weeks or months, what is the likelihood that they're going to even see that violation happened? By then, it's either fixed or swept under the rug, or an animal has passed away and nobody knows about it. There's so many scenarios that could take place in that time frame. And I know that has a lot of animal welfare folks quite concerned.
Yeah, I mean, if it comes out that they're just sort of plugging holes, I'd imagine that it would be hard to see sustainable change. But is sustainable change possible for a business like this?
I mean, anything's possible, but it depends on what your business model is. And from the employees that we spoke to, the business model is profit over animal welfare. Animals are seen as disposable, they say. They're just a way for them to turn a profit. The more guests they can get in, the more annual memberships they can sell, the more feeding encounters they can sell. As long as there's always an animal on the other end of that, whether it's one that replaced one that died, that replaced a previous one that died or not. And, again, USDA has kind of bare minimum standards when it comes to stuff like cage size and lighting and that kind of a thing. So that's, I think, part of the reason why this protest that took place on Sunday, this past weekend, as well as the previous ones, are because those in the animal welfare world don't have much option but to get the word out to patrons and say, hey, here's what's going on here. Maybe you don't want to take your children there. In fact, I know of a local teacher who I interviewed a few years back who petitioned her principal to stop allowing the school to take the kids there on field trips because she said they're not learning anything about the true nature of these animals.
Yeah. I mean, Las Vegas has always been kind of rough for that, Darcy. You've been here as long as I have, I think.
It's been a minute.
Yeah. And, Darcy, I had mentioned that I was going to be talking to you on this very topic to some friends over the weekend, and they just kind of perked up and they're like, we take our kids to SeaQuest and we love it. On multiple occasions, they like that the kids get to touch aquatic life. They mentioned they like seeing that renewed vitality at the historic Boulevard Mall. I don't want to put them all into a box, but a lot of animal rights activists really want to shut down places like SeaQuest and aren't happy with, fixes or change. So, Darcy, I just got to ask, if SeaQuest can get their act together on the safety front, is there a place for a venue like SeaQuest in Las Vegas to exist?
I suppose it would depend on who you ask. Definitely the animal welfare advocates who we have spoken to, from local all the way up to the Humane Society of the United States. And of course, PETA, who's been, very actively involved in trying to get SeaQuest shut down all across the country. They'll say that the business model that SeaQuest uses is not a sustainable one when it comes to the health and welfare of the animals. And that as long as they're prioritizing profit, it's not going to work. They'll ask how many animals have to die or be injured or neglected for our entertainment and enjoyment. Pointing out once again that what the people and their families may see really is just the surface of what's actually going on there. Now, on the flip side of that, there is a way to run an attraction like this. Let's look at Shark Reef at Mandalay Bay, for example.
Yeah.
Shark Reef is accredited by the AZA. That is a national accreditation organization for zoos and aquariums. And they have fairly high standards for how the animals are housed, how they are kept, how they are fed and cared for. When I spoke to the AZA, when I originally started investigating SeaQuest, they told me that there's no way that SeaQuest could ever receive AZA accreditation because they just do not meet the minimum standards. I know that one animal welfare advocate who I've worked with extensively on this, Gina Grayson of Nevada Voters for Animals, had attempted at one time to get AZA accreditation, be a barometer, be a standard, and wanted that SeaQuest, had to have that in order to stay open. The county commission didn't require the accreditation. And as I said, they wouldn't be able to get it if it was a standard for them. So that would effectively shut them down. Shark Reef is AZA accredited. And I think one of the distinctions there is that they don't do the hands-on interactions. You're not
anymore,
seeing that.
They used to do that. You used to be able to put your hand kind of in the water and something would slide underneath. Not my bag, but I remember that being part of it.
You're not hand feeding exotic animals like otters, wallabies, coatimundis. I mean, yeah, there are places, you go to SeaWorld, for example, and they have one tank where you can feed the rays. So there are places like that are accredited that do have some interactive elements to them, but not to the extent that SeaQuest does. And I would venture not in such a small space and with the caliber of training that those employees don't have, basically.
Is any of it so obvious? Because my friends, they didn't see rot on turtles. I asked them about that. They didn't see the despair in the eyes of hungry animals. Is it clear that is just unavoidable, that really is happening?
I think it depends on the day that you go. The employees have told us that when they notice that an animal is sick or lethargic or in some way not right, they'll pull it to the back so that the public doesn't see that animal. But then if you go on Google reviews right now and you look at the lower reviews that have been posted by customers just in the last few months, they have plenty of pictures showing the shark tanks or the stingray tanks. The water is just green. It is green. People report that it smells rotten and that they wish that, they could have smell-o-vision on Google so that you could, properly explain the smell that hits you when you come in there. SeaQuest is not going to want people to see animals that are sick or injured, and they'll pull them in the back. And several of the employees who we interviewed said there was a strict no phone policy in the back area wherein they were not allowed to take pictures. They were not allowed to take video of the animals that had been pulled off of display for various reasons. They don't want people to see what's in the back room is what those employees are telling us.
And Darcy, you mentioned, the animal rights groups that have been protesting out of the Boulevard Mall. We saw one on March 10th. You're reporting. But other than that, what happens next? Who has the responsibility now to make sure things don't get even worse?
Well, the oversight agencies retain that responsibility. For the Boulevard Mall location, that is Clark County Animal Protection Services. And then in addition to that, the USDA. Keep in mind that those inspections, the regularly scheduled inspections, twice a year, they just aren't there very often. So it's really up to customers who see things of concern to make formal reports. You have to file a formal complaint with Animal Protection Services and or with the USDA in order for them to know that there's something going on that they may need to come oversee, site correct, because they're just not there seeing it for themselves. And the more complaints that they get, the more awareness that they have of what's going on, the more they'll be able to do ostensibly, if they follow up in a timely fashion, to ensure that the place is running in as best a way as it possibly can, as they claim it does.
Yeah. Darcy Spears, thanks so much for coming on CityCast to talk about your reporting. It's rough.
David, thank you very much for having me. We can only hope that by keeping up the awareness that conditions improve for employees, guests, and animals alike.
That's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, you could go tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We take on the tough topics, and we'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky. I want Boulevard Mall to be fun and have good fun stuff.